Um, but what happens? The most important period is 1973, and the book I suggest reading at this point is called A Century of War by William Engdahl. This is I rank this in one of the most of my list of must reads.
Okay. A
And
Century
what he
of
points
War
out is
by
that
William Engdahl, right?
exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
And he points out in this book that the oil crisis was largely orchestrated by Kissinger,
Mm.
and that plans had already been set in advance that any monies that Saudi Arabia would receive would be deposited in Chase Bank in New York, which again was a Rockefeller holding.
Right.
So this happens at an opportune time. So as planned, I believe as discussed as a Bilderberger meeting, the price of oil was quadrupled.
Yeah.
And of course, Saudi Arabia becomes filthy rich overnight.
Yes.
And Kissinger comes up with this really evil plan. He had a list, I can't remember what the memorandum is called, but he had a list of nations that were overly developed, he felt, and that needed to be sent back to the Middle Ages. And so what he developed is this plan called petrodollar recycling.
Mm-hmm.
And this is amazing and it's evil. So Saudi Arabia, basically, Saudi Arabia takes all this money, dumps it into Chase Bank, and now that the third world is clamoring for money to try to buy this expensive oil, right?
Mm.
They have to go and they borrow that same money, which got deposited into Chase Bank to buy the oil that they couldn't afford.
Mm.
Petrodollar recycling is what it's called.
Yes.
But the key,
and this is in the same. I mean, wasn't it the U.S. Later on here that ran into this so-called scarcity where there wasn't enough oil,
Exactly. And the debt crisis.
Yes.
I can't remember what year took place. And but the key point in all of this is that now Saudi Arabia was awash with money. And this is also what happened is that after the Watergate scandal emerged, then the CIA was its hands was pretty tied. Then they had to pass everything through Congress. So they decided that they made a deal with Saudi Arabia that the way to get around all of this, the way to get around, running their projects through Congress for approval, instead they could have it financed by Saudi Arabia.
Mm.
So they figured this was perfect. And the first thing they started doing was supporting the Contras. And there you have the beginnings of the Iran-Contra affair.
Yes.
And this took place at a time when an excellent book is by Robert Dreyfuss. It's called Hostage to Khomeini. Mm-hmm. It's amazing in what it reveals. Unfortunately, it doesn't provide a lot of sources, so you got to double check everything. But it's amazing, and this is the book that totally reveals the relationship between the Freemasons and their creation of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay.
And the reason he does that is because he goes on to show that the Muslim Brotherhood assisted in the installation of the Ayatollah Khomeini, and essentially that the Ayatollah was a British agent.
Yeah.
So right after he's installed, America is called the Great Satan, blah blah blah, and they swear not to trade with terrorists, but they do. And this was an illegal action. This was the whole point of the investigation, right? Mm-hmm. So they start trading with the Iranians, and what they're doing is, and this is where Curtis's movie is important. Because this is where he explains most of the scenario.
The Power of Nightmares.
Yes, because at this point, this is when the U.S. is looking for a way to destroy the Soviet Union. And and this is where you have to look at the Bernard Lewis plan and Brzezinski and his Arctic crisis and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what they want to do is destroy the Soviet Union. So they figure the way to do so is by financing Islamic fundamentalism. As a bulwark against Soviet communism. And this is the plan. So So the way to do so is with off-the-shelf kind of, financing that is going to be funneled, is going to be provided by Saudi Arabia, and is going to be, it's going to come from oil money, but it's also going to come from drug money. And the key money laundering operation at this point is a bank called BCCI, which underwent the famous scandal. This was it achieved a lot of acclaim at the time because it was the first third world enterprise to achieve any kind of status.
Okay.
But I think it was Casey who called it the banks of crooks and criminals.
Right.
I mean, it was dirty to the core. Everybody was involved in there. It's all, the South American cartels. It's really at this point you have to read my book to get all the details. But it was thoroughly immersed in basically laundering Iran-Contra money and then channeling that money to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And so what was going on essentially is that the arms were being traded with Iran illegally, and then those were being sold to the Contras for cocaine. And that cocaine was being dropped off in Mena, Arkansas.
Yes.
Which was basically under Clinton's supervision.
Yes.
Exactly. The main guy at that point was Barry Seal.
Yeah.
And another very interesting tangent from this story is Barry Seal was recruited into the CIA the very same weekend and very same camp as Oswald.
That's interesting.
If you want, there's a very excellent documentary online about that called JFK 2.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
And the other documentary I'd recommend is Barry and the Boys by Hopsiker.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. So, so all this money gets dropped off at Mena, then it gets distributed to ghettos in the black gangs, particularly in LA, and kicks off the crack epidemic, which was revealed by Gary Webb and his Dark Alliance is what it called?
I'm not sure. Gary Webb.
But that was this is a story that actually reached the light of day that the CIA was distributing cocaine.
Yes.
And this has hit mainstream press. Except that the way that the media works is that they just never refer to it again. Right?
Well, exactly. It ends up on the back of the paper or in the fine print somewhere, and then it doesn't mention. It says, and again, this is something that still continues to this day. I mean, they caught a plane just the other day that was had CIA registering plates on it that were carrying, I think, 800 kilos or something like that of cocaine. So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, drug money is the key to financing for black operations, and it has been. The interesting thing is that it goes right back to Lord Palmerston, who again was on the Palladian right and coordinated with Bulwer Lytton to spearhead this project to spread Scottish Rite Freemasonry to the rest, and of course then recruited Afghani, because Lord Palmerston was Prime Minister of England at the time of the Opium Wars. Right?
Yeah.
Which was basically a strategy of inundating China with opium as a way of demoralizing and defeating that country. And that's when Britain basically began the process of monopolizing the world's drug trade. And that, centralized in Asia and still is to this point, right? It's still all funneled through Hong Kong. And the gangs like the Triads, that's when British coordination with the Triads began.
Right.
And that just evolved over time, and in the 20th century it evolved into Vietnam and then eventually Afghanistan.
Drugs, and money, war, it's all connected at the highest levels, obviously,
Absolutely.
And I think also that this, again, ties back into the whole story of Afghanistan and the growth of the poppy fields and the fact that, this is something that has increased since the Taliban has been so-called, thrown out or they've taken care of the region. And now the poppy production or the opium production is back on the same levels as they were before the time the U.S. were in there, so.
And, not only was Karzai a former was he a board member or director of, was it Unocal or whatever the company was that was trying to build a pipeline?
Not sure.
His brother, you just Google it. His brother is like a major drug kingpin in the country.
Okay. Jeez, my God. It's incredible. It's an incredible story, and this is all connected in that sense. And do you think also then that all the money that is coming in through all of these illegal activities regarding war, regarding drugs and so forth, is something that also financed the whole terrorism action that we were kind of alluding to before, in regards to Al-Qaeda, in regards to, again, Al-Qaeda is even there, or Afghanistan, that has a background or a connection with the Iran Contra affairs, like an offshoot of everything. It doesn't just, one thing doesn't just start off and then end off. It's like everything it's a red line through all of these things, right?
Oh, absolutely not. They got to a point where the Americans supposedly felt that they needed more forces in Afghanistan. So they decided that they needed to start recruiting Muslims from around the world to come and join the fight.
Okay, yeah.
And so they went to Saudi Arabia and they said, give us a leader who can kind of spearhead this rallying cry. So they found Bin Laden.
Right.
And Bin Laden was the chief leader of this. Basically he was the one that was recruited. You have to Google this as well too. That there was a point where Bin Laden was brought to the U.S. as Tim Osman.
Yes, that's right.
And so Bin Laden basically features in this project right from the very beginning, and undergoes this worldwide recruitment campaign all over, different Muslim communities all over. And this happened in the U.S. in various mosques all over the U.S. in Europe, where they would show jihad tapes and things like that about the great glorious fight in Afghanistan, and calling all these guys to go support the CIA struggle in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Being duped all the while that it was in service of Islam, and many did. And this is why the chief ideologue and also a friend of Muhammad Qutb in Saudi Arabia was Abdullah Azam.
Okay. Mm.
And he's the one who basically formulated the fatwa that you could call it, that was used to justify this, that getting on a plane and traveling halfway around the world to go fight the evil infidel, in
right.
your service of Islam. Really, you're just serving a CIA operation. So, so they were all interconnected, obviously.
So let's see here if we can, tie this together a little bit then with, we obviously talked about the connection here with 9/11, as you alluded to in the end here. We had, Madrid, we had the London bombings, all this stuff. And I guess the latest version of that, as we've seen right now, is the Mumbai attacks in India. What do you see there as the background story? Is this the same? I haven't followed actually the story that closely, but it's the same basic thing that is being drawn out. Although the fact is that this seemed to be some kind of Hindi group behind it. What have you found? Have you researched this? Anything, David?
Well, the claim, which is pretty obvious, is that it was going to be the ISI that was responsible. The ISI is the Pakistani Secret Service.
Yeah.
And, as if this is supposed to be a big surprise, because the ISI was the arm through which the CIA worked to coordinate the so-called Mujahideen in Afghanistan for 20 years. Mm. Bin Laden and all these Mujahideen organizations were coordinating with the ISI. So, and the BCCI bank, so they were all interconnected way back. So of course, the ISI has been responsible for false flag operations. As far as I understand, is that this was designed to put some pressure on Pakistan.
Okay, really? Because I think that it seems to be very much the old, again, tying back to the old idea of the class of civilizations here is something that is prominent, because this is spreading globally all over the world.